Hey, it's Chris. What are we doing? 2 years looking back. How do you feel about games now? We've done a little bit on the convention side of things. People are starting to, feel that vibe, but we're still doing the crowdfunding thing as well. 2 years ago, crowdfunding. Big names. Big products. Mostly delivered. Some lived up to the hype. Some maybe not quite as much. And also, your mileage may vary. Let's look back. Reactions. Gut thoughts. How do I feel about things then versus now? Let's go. So first up, Awakened Realms. Almost on a monthly basis. This is their month of October, right? 2021, we have Lords of Ragnarok. 2022, we did Tainted Grail 2. Now, this October, we had Dragon Eclipse. So October is one of their prime months. So be it. Lords of Ragnarok, though, the spiritual successor. I'm going to make a comparison here. Stay with me. This is their spiritual successor, Lords of Hellas, Lords of Ragnarok. Ragnarok, see where I'm going with that? Blood Rage to Rising Sun. So are we going to see a third in their trilogy? I'm going to make the argument right now. Liege is calling it here. Yes. No insider knowledge. They don't tell me anything. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say, it's done well. It's probably going to get more, right? I know, shocker there is a big prediction. But I'm going to make the comparison. That's what they're going for. Now, I have a copy. It is the third time over the last 3 years that I have legitimately clicked cancel pledge on crowdfunding, and GameFound has not canceled my pledge, which is kind of a turnoff, to be frank with you. It's happened once a year each of the last 3 years. I take blame for it, but I still think that their process, it's not a clear process. It doesn't eliminate it when it says it eliminates it. You have to basically like double or triple eliminate it. So either way, I decided just to bite the bullet and keep the pledge as opposed to losing like 20% and maybe just selling it at cost at this point. But I don't know. I mean, there's something about a 40-page rule book of an area control game when I have other games like Rumble Nation or El Grande, where sometimes I feel like simplicity is more. And that's why I'm in love with the more recent Knizia games. I always mess that up, forget which way it is. Of like Cascadero, Blue Lagoon. At the time of me filming this, Cascadero just went live. So, I mean, look at this. This is it, right? And this game has so much depth of strategy because the key point I'm going here with this is I'm not going to say it's a bad game or not. I don't have enough experience with it to tell you whether or not you should get it or how good it is or how the nuts and bolts compares. I'm not going to call the sky is falling and crowdfunding is declining because of it, but depth of a game doesn't come from the thickness of a rule book. And I think we're losing sight of that as someone who looks at multiple crowdfunding projects a week that tend to have rule books in excess of 20 to 30 plus pages. There's only so many of those types of games you can learn. I can tell you exactly how to play Cascadero off memory right now because it's that simple, but it's also got a ton of depth on the board itself. And you don't have to have one to have the other in terms of the rule book and the depth. So I don't know. I mean, they did really well on crowdfunding. Don't get me wrong. It was a ton of money. Awakened Realms has tons of followers in that sense. Like, this is a bad performing project for them, relativistically speaking, and it raised over $3 million. Bad project, more in the sense that comparatively, 11,000 backers, I don't know. Sprawling overextension is my concern. Again, every time I talk about them, best miniatures on the market, period. But I don't need this big of game with this much overhead. I just can't get it played anymore, personally speaking. And I mean, look at this all-in Sundrop. You're spending, $400 to get this shipped. I'm going to make an argument. It's not a lifestyle game like we've previously talked, but I'm going to make a lifestyle comment here because you're dropping lifestyle money to get this. So people are happy with it, I guess. Take it for what you will. I'm sure it has good ratings on Board Game Geek. But is it for you? I think it's for me. We'll see. But, a year or two from now, a month or two from now, if it's not in my collection, I wouldn't be surprised either. So take that for what you will. Next up, I mean, we're going to go with a couple that are already well delivered and at the opposite end of things, very well received. At the time of me filming this, we are eagerly anticipating Marvel Dice Throne, X-Men. And so, hearkening back to 2 years ago, we had the original Marvel Dice Throne. And at that time, I was not buying it. I had played the regular Dice Throne and it did not catch my fancy. I have kids now that are of the age that really like it. It's grown on me. Battle Yahtzee, asymmetric battle Yahtzee, if you will. Again, I don't say that disparagingly. I say that as a fact. That's just what it is. And some people like it, some people don't. Some people are going to gripe and complain about the X-Men versus the asymmetric unique ones they did previously. Some people are going to groan about the fact that it's Marvel. Some people are going to groan about the fact that they're not going back to their roots and they're playing like business side of things. I've got people in the YouTube comment section complaining I'm talking too much about social commentary and the toxic community that's over there sometimes and elsewhere. And that's funny. People criticizing me for talking about toxic communities. They clearly missed my video, like, 2 years ago now, almost, talking about the horrible community that's Board Game Revolution, right? Ruled with an iron dictator fist over there, too. But, just people not seeing the, forest for the trees. Anyway, I'm excited. It's grown on me that much. Now, do I need it? No. Roxley puts out a good product, though. You get your money's worth. You're not going to get the battle chest necessarily as easily. They've always had their stuff go to retail, but it's almost routinely been higher. It's almost routinely been significantly later. So your mileage is going to vary. The only thing that really hasn't was the re-rolled version of Season 1, which you can buy them all individually now for about the same or maybe slightly less, slightly more. I don't remember. I don't have those prices offhand. So take that for what you will. But it's going to be a smashing success. It was an absolutely smashing success. I mean, whether or not it's right for you, people love it for what it is. And that's the most important thing. And it's not 40 pages of rulebook anyway. But then the next one we're going to talk about very similarly. Again, mea culpa on this one. Mea culpa. I'm eating some crow on this one. When the first time Restoration Games launched Thunder Road Vendetta, I looked at this and I said, this doesn't look good. This looks like 80s nostalgia playing off of that. Looks like Fireball Island and the issue I had with that all over again. And it failed. They actually canceled the project and then they relaunched it at this point. And then people got it and they really love it. And I have a copy of Chrome sitting relatively unplayed. No, I got one off the secondary market. No, I didn't actually get one off the secondary market. I Google searched 10 pages deep and found a shop that had Chrome still in it, out of state, and they were willing to mail it to me. Boom. And avoided about the $100 plus markup that people are selling for on the secondary market right now. But they've announced that there's going to be a reprint. Because it's done so well, because they've, had some limited stock. It seems like every convention they have a little bit more stock that's able to eke out. So I don't really know what the production side of things or back stock of it is. But people love this Mad Max style racing, take that, trash 'em if you got 'em style of game. It's got a little bit of exclusives in the Chrome edition. It's got a few expansions that are not yet out, I believe, at the time of me filming this. So it's got a little bit of, again, that early bird feeling like they did with some of the expansions for Return to Dark Tower. Say what you will about that. They've gone that route as opposed to Marvel Dice Throne a little bit in the, you're going to get it a heck of a lot earlier. And usually don't really care. This one appears to be the exception rather than the rule. Again, a very successful campaign. And just for comparison's sake, right? Here's the original Dice Throne, 20,000, 2 million. And this is one that casuals browsing Kickstarter are going to look at much heavier, and that's still the Kickstarter crowdfunding effect. Thunder Road, again, 760,000. This reprint's going to kill it even more. 7,600 people. So, again, both of these I poo-pooed. They're both in my collection now. You're allowed to have a change in taste. And you're allowed to get rid of stuff that you thought was good, and you're going to end up with stuff that you didn't think was good. And then you're always going to have the stuff that you know is good and works out for you. And contrary to Reddit's crowdfunding opinion in general of everything is awful and all the games are overproduced and underutilized and they're all just production value over the top and ridiculous and not worth it and you never know what you're doing and everyone who does crowdfunding is a blank idiot. So anyway, next game. Let's stay with the big ones here. Too Many Bones Unbreakable. That was 2 years ago, folks. I have my copy of Too Many Bones Unbreakable. I went for it. I said, you know what? Maybe this was the game that's gonna change it for me for Too Many Bones. Spoilers! Nope. I'm trying to sell it right now. Trying to sell it. I don't like it. I think it's convoluted. I think it's too much of a lifestyle game. I think it's too hard to get into. I don't think the rule book has been significantly improved for people to learn the game who are new to the game since the first version came out. You know, I am a firm believer, I will die on this hill as one of my board gaming hot takes, that I don't believe you should have to watch a video to learn how to play a game. I think a rulebook should be good enough that you can absolutely 100% understand all the nuances, how to play without having to go elsewhere. Period. You can tell me I'm wrong in the comment section. I won't believe you. I won't even debate you because it's not a debate in my mind, right? And this doesn't change my opinion on the game. It's not for me. It's not for me. For those reasons. Yeah, if you learn the game, if you know how to play the game, if you want to min-max, and again, that's probably my other problem, right? Like, I'm not a huge min-maxer. These games, you get the asymmetric characters, and the people oftentimes, now I'm hoping that, or would think that these newer iterations of characters have a little less, this is the route you go every time with the character. Like an RPG, right? Where you're min-maxing and this is the one path that you take to make the best character, and every other deviant off that is maybe kind of okay, but not nearly as good. And so you have people that are like just purely strategizing that aspect of things. That type of game just doesn't fit with me either. So it's kind of a double whammy in my book. I went for it though, I tried it. It's not like I'm just bashing stuff for the sake of bashing it. It's not like I'm disparaging it because I, don't want to like it. I want to like it. I just can't get it. I just, it and me just oil and water right now. I would love to change that in the future. It doesn't stop me from backing other projects with Chip Theory. I have 20 strong coming to me whenever the heck that gets here. Those pre-production copies that got sent to reviewers have been out for like a couple months now. The rest of us backers are kind of waiting, going, and then hearing the announcement for season 2 going, where's season 1? So kind of waiting for that. And again, that's a outside of my comfort zone style of game too, because again, just like we saw with the previous two, Thunder Road and Marvel Dice Throne, sometimes you go back to this and your taste has changed and your appeal has changed and your understanding has changed. And sometimes, frankly speaking, just like your taste buds, you try that new food again, it hasn't changed. And it's okay. But that's why you try new stuff. And that's why I tell my kids that all the time, even though they routinely, you would think that cauliflower was the worst thing ever created in the history of man. Right? I actually love cauliflower. Side note there. Okay, then we have a couple other projects, mostly also delivered, several big name IPs. The more recently delivered, Hegemony. Class warfare game. Very heavy. Very lengthy. Heavy Euro style game. Kind of flew under the radar. Kind of did really well. So it reminds me more of like the My Father's Work, only the heavier Euro economic style of things with these asymmetric classes and trying to, be the proletariat or the workers or whatever. You know what I'm talking about. I'm getting myself in over my head here before I pull up the page. Okay, Hegemony, lead your class to victory. Again, like I said, under the radar, wasn't expecting huge things. I think, this was one that Hegemonic Games reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in trying this? And I looked at it and I said, FOMO-wise, yes. Playstyle wise and my ability to comprehend and get the full nuance of this game, no, I had to pass. And then it came to crowdfunding and I was pleasantly surprised to see it do really well because I had no clue on a game like this. As I said, 1 to 4 player card driven asymmetric game as a whole. Now, how heavy is it? A 4 on Board Game Geek, folks. 4. I don't know why I'm double clicking and it's doing that, but anyway, take that for what you will. Heavy gamers are the niche and heavy gamers vote heavy games in highly. So somehow it's already reached 327. Do you know it was in the top 1,000? I guarantee you didn't. But people seem to like it. And it was relatively expensive. And I'm pretty sure they'll come out with a second one at this point. So, not actually nearly as bad as I thought. £59. That's really good, actually. So a reprint's definitely going to be more. That was probably underpriced. They probably didn't make much or maybe even lost a little on that. So, again, too deep for me, too heavy for me. But relatively, again, well received. What else we got going on? Well, again, we're going to go a little bit of everything here. Lightweight. I've got 1 copy sitting up there. Haven't done a formal review on it, but I kind of like it. It just missed my top 10 of the year from last year. Kids Table board games with power plants here. Got it at the very beginning, actually. Just kidding. Very beginning, I think even maybe January 2023. So this is one that might be a tweener. But basically, Rado's playthrough sort of convinced me. And what you're essentially doing is you're laying down area control and the types of these plants. And you have like, I don't know, I don't even remember, 6 down or so on a game-by-game basis. 4 maybe? I forget. But they each have a minor and a major power depending on which one you want to take and what area and where you're playing them and how many you're around. And so it is kind of good. I mean, the Kickstarter edition was a decent price. I mean, 55 Canadian dollars was pretty good. And they offered a lot of exclusives. And that's what Kids Table Board Game has done with some of these, with like Creature Comforts. Just enough deluxifications and enough exclusives to not make you feel like you're missing out on stuff, but also enough to make you incentivized to go get it. So their one launching later at the end of this month is like a remake of a game called Wasabi. Again, I have no clue. And their other diced veggies one was a straight to retail. So this was their most recent, I think-ish. I mean, it didn't raise a ton of money. Like, it only got 133,000 Canadian. So what is that, just over 100,000 US? Do you need the Kickstarter edition? Well, I mean, it's got like the wooden upgrades and it's got a little bit of the extra content with the plant cards as well. Like they say there, plus 9 stretch goals there and just a whole bunch of other stuff. So, I mean, I don't know. This is another one that I could see, you know, if it was in my collection a year from now and I really played it and really loved it a lot more, I could see me keeping it. This is also one I could see myself easily getting rid of, just not because it's a bad game, but because it's never going to get played over other things, right? And that's the thing. I need amazing games. I don't need good to pretty good games, right? And I'm okay with that. Can't have and play everything. Think about that one there for a second as we go on to the next. So then we have a remake, again, sort of one that I was a little bit split on. I really like the appeal of this 2-player Hanamikoji. They did a new edition with Geisha's Road, sort of a spin-off sequel side of things, complexifying it a little bit and adding a little bit of content. Got some promos for this one, got some promos for the original, which are apparently a little bit hard to get. They bundled them together, so you kind of had to get some of it. It's apparently not as well received as the first one, which is kind of weird. Like, you'd think you'd play off the first one, but I think that's sometimes the problem. And sometimes you try and do too much when less is more. The beauty is in the simplicity sometimes of these games. It doesn't overly complicate things. Card-driven, meta-style games. And so it's just not overall as well received, at least on Board Game Geek, as the previous original edition, and which is kind of disappointing. If you want a little bit more complex one, I guess that's what you can kind of go for. It didn't raise a ton of money on crowdfunding either. One of those where I'd love to pick it up and try it sometimes, because with these 2-player asymmetric card games, I just don't know if they're going to fit or click well, right? Like Fox in the Forest, I picked that one up as a 2-player trick-taking head-to-head. I thought it was clever. I kind of liked it. My wife hated it, right? Hated it. She's like, I do not like this. I don't want to play this again with you. And she doesn't say that in a lot of games, right? Like, she says, that was fine. She says, oh yeah, I'd like to play that again. Those are her main 2 emotions when it comes to these games. And every once in a while, though, it's one like that where she's like, nope, Chris, we're not playing that again. Like Spirit Island, like Bullet. 2 of my top 5 games of all time. Will not play either of them with me whatsoever. Right? Take that for what you will. But that's kind of why this one, I feel like, is a weird mixed bag. So there you go. Then we go back over to Steamforged, one of their more recent forays into the Resident Evil IP, Resident Evil 1, because they kind of, I don't think they did them. Did they do them all? I don't know. Didn't they do like 2 first and then 3 and then they're going back to 1, and people are clamoring for who's it's in, what's it games, and I don't know. I never played that series. Very familiar with it peripherally, but does that make sense? Very familiar with it peripherally. Like, I'm aware of it. I'm aware of some of the characters' names, but the plots are all, bad guys, mutant creatures, evil corporation trying to take things over, and good guys, some version of cops and taking them out, horror survival game. Board game, though? Again, you've heard me say previously, not a huge fan of horror survival, except for, like, the Cthulhu. So, let me go over, see, here's Hanamikoji. And 3,400 backers, $166,000. Again, more than power plants, actually, so that's impressive. Then we go over here and we'll see this, and you can see fulfillment was completed by Steamforged in September completely. And yeah, I mean, 9,500 backers, $1.5 million. I think these have been relatively well received by backers who really like this style of game. I think they've said the Resident Evil series is one of their better, Steamforge's better games overall. Does it compare? Do you want it? I don't see a lot of people outside, though, the Resident Evil fandom looking at this game as heavily. So if you saw this game and you weren't aware of the IP or you didn't have any affiliation to the IP, that's the sort of group of people I would be most interested to know whether or not this was attractive from their standpoint. Again, as someone in that group, the answer is no, but I always wonder if I'm the outlier and the exception rather than the rule, because, you know, a lot of other places in my life, I am definitely the outlier. So there you go. We have two more to talk about, one delivered, one undelivered. First is Mythwind from Open Owl Studios, makers of Stars of Ikarios. This was sort of their foray into the asymmetric sort of Euro style worker game, more Zen and open world ish. And again, they were nice enough to send me a copy to kind of try out and to talk about during the campaign. Interesting concept. It just wasn't my thing, right? It just wasn't my thing. I understood it, just wasn't as appeasing. Like, I'm not a big Zen person. Lands of Galzir, fantastic game, not for me, right? Very similar vibes of just open world Zen-like, kind of going until you don't want to, essentially. And that's kind of cool, though, at the same time. If it's for you, go for it. Not delivered, but per this one right here, if we go down, final stretch, they're in the midst of production. They're going to be shipping out from the factory literally at the time of me filming this. So, you know, expect it maybe around the end of the year at this point. Maybe you get it as an early Christmas present. Are you hyped about this? Is it going to live up to it? Are you going to play it repeatedly? Because again, the other thing I'd worry about is with all these asymmetric mechanisms of you controlling your section of things, I'd worry that it's going to be ultimately needing more players on an individual basis. So you can kind of see how other people are doing things as well at the same time. Like if you're playing all of these solo individually, I don't think the engagement would be quite as much there personally. But that's maybe more of my own preference than anything else being projected, if you will, onto this. So we'll see. We'll see. This is one that I very much doubt will ever end up in my collection, as opposed to some of these others that I, passed on originally. And we'll talk about the last one here, because I think one or two of the big name channels really hyped it up and thought it was really good, and that was City of the Great Machine. Again, I did a brief video on it during the very end of the campaign from Crowd E Games. I did a very brief video on it towards the end of the campaign from Crowd Games. Just a very interesting take on the one versus all strategy, where you've got like this AI city system and the moving revolving areas and the hidden who's what's it's in the one versus all side of things. It definitely did something unique. I don't think it was the one versus all for me, though. That's okay. I have other flavors of one versus all that I just slightly prefer, because that's the other thing. I don't think that's a big mechanic you can have too many of those games of, because the problem with one versus alls, as I said with my Beast video recently, so you really almost always, if you are the teacher, you have to be the one. And how many times do you want to be the one? Do you always want to be the one in your plays? Because that's what's essentially asking you to do, because inevitably the many are a little bit easier, a little bit more straightforward, a little bit less strategic overall, which, I mean, it's fun to be on the one side sometimes and triumph over the many, but it's also more difficult and it's also more, taxing. So that's my biggest concern with it. Again, a very respectable 7.9 on Board Game Geek, which is actually really high for a one versus all. Just doesn't have the ratings that some of those other ones do in addition, like Hegemony. Is it weird? Side note here. Does it feel like to anyone else that the hardcore, heavier gamers tend to go onto Board Game Geek and rate more overall? We're not talking about rate high, but just rate in general. That's just me and personal opinion speaking. But yeah, I mean, it did relatively not nearly as much, right? A little more than Power Plants. Hanamikoji, around right that area, $164,000. So not impressive on crowdfunding, but people seem to really like it above and beyond. So if it's your ilk, if you're looking for a one versus many, give it a shout out. There you go, 10 games. Looking back 2 years, my thoughts, my mea culpas, my, I'm glad I didn't get this, my I'm glad I ended up picking this up, my everything in between. And stuff that I also go, I will never have an interest in this, and that's okay too. But again, the question is, how many of these end up in your collection? How many of these you end up keeping? And how many of them are just fails for you? And it's a good way to keep yourself accountable by looking back and saying, how do I really feel about this? What is my actual track record on crowdfunding? Right? Now, people do that all the time. Does anyone keep track of their retail history? How many of those games you get from retail stay in your collection? Right? Ooh, that's a painful one. Don't want to think about that one, right? Do you? That's all I got. Have a great day. Stay classy. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think. What on this list you have no interest in? What on this list do you absolutely look back now and say, I missed at that? Or I got this just like me with Thunder Road and Marvel Dice Throne? What do you think? What more importantly, is maybe going to do that now for you on crowdfunding as well, if there's anything. It doesn't have to be. There could be. Thanks for watching. See you around.